Good morning. So, my gratitude has only grown in the last 24 hours. It's been fantastic being here with all of you, and I just hearing all the things that you're doing already is something that I have a joy as in my work of being able to hear about all the time, but I think some of you, I hope, are having that joy now, being able to hear about what so many other organizations are doing. And I hope that you're feeling inspired and feeling hopeful because I certainly do when I hear about all the work that y'all are doing. I really do believe that what we're doing is adding up. Talking about the commons, stewarding, purchasing that stewards the commons. This is one of my favorite quotes. There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We are all crew. And so this must be a crew meeting. We have a job to do. What is our job? I was thinking about this and I thought, okay, our job is to purchase the things that the earth needs. We do the purchasing for the earth. And then I realized, wait a minute, there are no loading docks there that spaceships come up to. There's no loading docks where space dump trucks pull up to. It's all, everything we're doing, all our purchasing, we are purchasing of the earth. Everything we're doing is just organizing and moving around the resources and the human capacity that is already here, right? And so we are stewards of our own experience, and as a species, and we have grown as a species to this place where we have unbelievable technology and transportation and ability to have that influence and that curation of our experience be absolutely global to the point where it can be hard to find places on Earth that haven't been touched and changed by human hands. And so the issue of the commons is this idea that there are resources like our entire planet that doesn't belong to anyone, that we all depend on, and that really, if we're going to figure out how to share it well, it's not a technology problem. It's a people problem. It's a process of deciding. How are we going to share these resources, and how are we going to do it in a way that makes all of our lives better and allows all of us to be able to enjoy the fact of being alive on this amazing planet. So what I wanted to just comment on is that when we talk about purchasing, we talk a lot about purchasing, conventional purchasing, which is the idea that we want to achieve value for money, price, quality, delivery. But it's not just that. You also need to be buying things that add value to your organization. If you're buying stuff and it just goes in the trash because it's not the right things or it's not being used or whatever, that's purchasing that's not adding value. So it's not just about purchasing at a good price. It's about purchasing in ways that are really strengthening our organizations. It's a stewardship job already, even just conventional purchasing. It's an absolute stewardship job. And so what we talk about a lot in SPLC is this idea that in addition to those things, we want to be doing purchasing in a way that is strengthening our environment, strengthening our communities, and strengthening our economy. And what that is, that's radical in the sense that, it is possible to do sustainable supply chain work and sustainable procurement work where you only are interested in whether or not your organization's nose is clean. Whether or not you've got your dots in a line and there's nothing bad happening in your supply chain. Without necessarily being concerned about whether or not what we're all doing is adding up in the whole, right? And if we all just go along and we do our own little thing and assume that it will all add up to a healthy world, well, we've already seen that that's not true, right? And so what's amazing that's happening these days is that organizations, and this is what gives me so much hope, organizations like yours, but also many corporate organizations, government organizations, are starting to put their MBAs and their PhDs to work on the idea that what we each have a role, each of our organizations, not only in taking responsibility for just what we're doing, but also really being partners with everybody who's depending on these common resources and making sure that they are being managed sustainably and for the benefit of everyone. And that's a big shift. That's the difference, in my opinion, between responsible business and sustainable business. Responsible business is just, what am I doing? Am I being responsible with my work? Sustainable business is saying, okay, once I've got that figured out, is all of this adding up? And so we're seeing things like the science-based target initiatives, which we'll have a session on later today, which is tons of companies coming together and asking the question, is what we're doing on climate change going to add up in the whole to avoiding 2 degrees Celsius warming on this planet? There's context-based work being done to figure out within local watersheds, for example, is what we're doing adding up to water stewardship and to the healthy soils and all the things that we need. And at SPLC, and I want to credit Jason for this, we've talked always about the idea of this stewardship and the idea that what we're talking about when we're talking about sustainable purchasing is the idea that our organizations are not independent. We are interdependent. We are, in fact, dependent on systems that only function well when we all care to make sure that they function well. And so that's our environmental systems, our natural systems that all life depends on, including our organizational lives. The social cohesion on which our organizations and our businesses operate. There's not a lot of business being done in Syria right now, parts of Syria, right? I mean, we have only the ability to thrive as organizations within certain contexts. And so we have to steward those. Our economy, the health of the markets themselves, our ability to do business and to find the things to meet our organization's needs depends on there being healthy marketplaces that are inclusive and so on. And so as members, we came up with this long list of ways that whether we're intentional about it or not, our purchasing decisions can positively or negatively be influencing those systems. And so it's things like, the arrows that are pointing up are things that if our purchasing is enhancing biodiversity, that's great. That's strengthening that system that we all depend on. If it's causing acidification or smog or and so on, greenhouse gas emissions, those are things that are detracting from the strength of those systems. And what I like to point out to folks when talking particularly to procurement audiences is that if you look at the economy side, so many of these things are things that you're already doing. We don't talk about as sustainability, but, making sure that we're doing business in a way that's fair and inclusive and transparent and, in ways that are, countering corruption and bribery and all of those types of things. That's just normal practice in this country, for the most part. But if you go to a country where it's not, you'll very quickly appreciate how important that stewardship is to people's ability to access opportunities to meet their own needs by contributing to the economy and so on. And if you look at the social aspects as well, many of these things, maybe not by these names in some cases, are things you're already doing. They're risk management things, and other aspects. And so just to say that I just told you that conventional purchasing is, about your organization, and then I said this is sustainable purchasing and it's beyond that. But now what I'm telling you is that actually when you look at sustainable purchasing, you're already doing many of these things. You're just not calling them stewardship. And what I'm suggesting to you is that you can add meaning to your work, you can add meaning to your team's work, and you can connect your work to much bigger things that are happening in the world that are really exciting if you start talking about them that way. So for example, 193 countries have come together to decide what do we want to achieve. They've went through a rigorous process to come up with 17 goals for us as a species by 2030. Let's end poverty by 2030. Let's end hunger by 2030. All of these things are amazing things that I think we all want. When we're doing a contract for the next 5 years with an organization, a supplier organization, what we're effectively doing is we're locking up, 100,000 labor hours, and some resources over the next few years to meet our organization's needs. When we do that, if we're not asking them to do those things for us in a way that adds up to these goals, then what we've effectively done is just taken a share of our human capacity to create, and we've peeled it off of this project and said it's not going to be part of that project for the next 5 years because we've asked for them to do work in a way that isn't consistent with meeting these goals. So we have an opportunity in our work to put people to work bringing these goals into existence. And so just another example of something that you can do to connect your work and bring more meaning to your work, and particularly for those of you who are working with young people, millennials and others. I mean, millennials get a bad rap. I think it's just curmudgeonly, honestly. But I'm so grateful that they have really high expectations for what we are doing with our work, that it be meaningful and that it add up. And that's really what this is about. So now I'm going to turn the stage over to a couple of speakers who are going to tell you about just a few opportunities for you and your organizations through your purchasing to do this work of expanding the impact of your work beyond just your own four walls or your own even supply chain. And so I hope you are inspired by those stories. Some of them are ones that are going to have sessions afterwards, and I hope actually all three of them will be in sessions afterwards. We have a session on impact sourcing or on procurement with people in mind. We have a session on water, and we have a session on recycling markets. So also check those out. All right, thank you so much.